Right now on KGW, a local school principal is under arrest accused of possessing and distributing child sexual abuse material. Coming up, the new details that we're learning, plus a fate of Oregon's massive transportation bill is on hold. Yet again, the next steps and why some lawmakers say it's just a temporary fix. Then,
the federal government is exceeding their authority in this regard.
the Department of Justice is suing the state of Oregon. Why Oregon state officials say the president is using the agency to go after his political opponents. And later,
a lot of people say the Cotton Club was the one that started it all.
You know, and this is right in Portland, in our backyard, and a lot of us don't even know about this.
a sneak peek at a new documentary highlighting the Cotton Club and several other key venues. How they tell the story of music history in Portland's Albina neighborhood ahead on the news at noon. Developing news this afternoon out of Rainier, Oregon. The principal at Rainier, Oregon Senior High School is under arrest, accused of possessing and distributing child sexual abuse material. Thank you for joining us here at noon. I'm China Green. The Cowlitz County Sheriff's Office says 49-year-old Jeremy Williams was taken into custody on Tuesday. Deputies say social media accounts linked to a Longview resident were sending and receiving the images. Investigators served multiple search warrants and say that the accounts belong to Williams. He was arrested at his home where detectives seized several devices. The Rainier School District confirms Williams was already on paid administrative leave for an unrelated issue, and officials say that there is no evidence any students were involved. Stick with KGW for the latest on this developing story. We'll have more details coming up this evening, starting on KGW News at 4. Meantime, two men who allegedly enticed a 13-year-old girl into 3 years of prostitution will face 19 and 15 years in prison. The Multnomah County DA's office says Dominic Williams met the girl in 2021 and then trafficked her on the street in Multnomah County. The other defendant, Khalif Newcomb, trafficked the victim when she was separated from Williams. In a statement, the prosecutor said, quote, "I am extremely proud of this brave young woman for coming forward to relive and report some of the most violent and traumatizing events of her life. Her courage led to holding 5 dangerous men accountable for some of the most awful crimes in our community, buying and selling children for sex. 3 other people are facing charges, including purchasing sex with a minor." New at noon, the former head of Centers for Disease Control and Prevention testified today that America's public health system is headed to a, quote, dangerous place. Susan Monterez blasted Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for his anti-vaccine beliefs. She told lawmakers today that Kennedy demanded that she pre-approve recommendations from a CDC panel or face termination. Kennedy denies those accusations. Monterez was fired after 29 days on the job. She warned that deadly diseases like polio and whooping cough are poised to make a comeback in the U.S.
I was fired for holding the line on scientific integrity, but that line does not disappear with me. It now runs through every parent deciding whether to vaccinate a child, every physician counseling a patient, and every American who demands accountability.
A CDC panel is expected to vote on a new vaccine guideline this week in Atlanta. Meantime, states on the West Coast, they're not waiting for the CDC recommendations. In the last 30 minutes, the newly created West Coast Health Alliance released its guidelines. That alliance includes Oregon, Washington, California, and Hawaii. So here's a look at the chart. Now, these are the recommendations for COVID-19, flu, and RSV. But let's talk about COVID-19 because it differs from the FDA approval. So the FDA is only recommending it for those over 65 and people with existing health problems. But the West Coast Alliance has specific recommendations for all age groups. It's recommending the vaccine for anyone who chooses to get it. The director of the Oregon Health Authority released a statement saying, quote, "Our actions today affirm that here public health is about protecting people, not playing politics, and that every family who wants protection this respiratory virus season should be able to get it simply, safely, and affordably." All right, meantime, about an hour ago, the Federal Reserve cut interest rates for the first time this year. So here's a live look at the Dow Jones. Stocks rose in the moments after the Fed made that announcement. The decision comes as the central bank faces challenges on multiple fronts here, from an uneasy economy to political drama leading up to that meeting. Meanwhile, experts were split on whether to even make a cut and if it was appropriate right now, as labor market appears to be slowing dramatically. Lower rates could help businesses hire as it becomes less expensive to take out loans and credit card rates fall for consumers. But at the same time, inflation has been creeping up. Typically, a central bank would raise rates to push inflation down, but the Fed's top priority now is apparently supporting the labor market. All right, headed over to Chris McGinnis. Hot one yesterday. It seems fine today, but is the heat going to creep up?
It'll inch upward from where we are now, but not as warm as yesterday. Of course, we did hit 90 at a couple places, PDX 89. Vancouver hit 90 yesterday. Today, it's gorgeous out there. Look at the water shimmering there with the sunshine over the Columbia River as we look down on the Interstate Bridge. At last check at Pearson Field on the Vancouver side of the Columbia, it's 73. In downtown Portland, we're clear at 72. The freezing level this afternoon up over 14, almost 15,000 feet. To China's point, not as warm today as yesterday, and that's what this map shows us. In fact, it's 10 degrees cooler right now at noontime in Portland than it was yesterday at this time when we were on our way to the upper 80s and low 90s. So a significant cooling trend now for Southwest Washington and Northwest Oregon. That will slowly filter across the rest of the region as we go into tomorrow. But in the meantime, it's 70 in downtown, it's 75 in West Linn, and as we slide down to the south, Salem, checking in with 72 at last report. The plan for the remainder of our Wednesday, full sunshine, temperatures inching up towards about 80 or 81 late this afternoon. We'll also start to feel the northwest breeze kick in later today, a sign of some marine air and likely some morning clouds tomorrow. So we'll look at that and also what is shaping up to be, I think, kind of a 50-50 weekend forecast. It's Wednesday. We can start talking about the weekend, right? More on that in a few minutes.
Thank you, Chris. Oregon lawmakers have once again postponed the vote on a massive funding bill designed to provide Oregon transportation agencies with billions of dollars. So the special session will now wrap up between September 29th and October 1st as Democrats wait for Senator Chris Gorsuch to recover from back surgery. Without his vote, they don't think that the bill will pass. But in a statement, Democratic Senate President Rob Wagner addressed the delay, saying in part, "The bill is important for all Oregonians who rely on our roads and maintenance workers whose jobs are at risk. At the same time, we are not going to do anything that would put the health of our colleague at risk." Republicans fired back, with Republican Senate Leader Bruce Starr saying while they hope Gorsuch makes a full recovery, this entire situation was avoidable. And even if the bill does end up passing, Democrats even admit that it's only a short-term funding fix. The U.S. Justice Department is taking Oregon and Maine to court, accusing both states of breaking federal law. So the Trump administration here says that the secretaries of state of both states refused to hand over voter data at the DOJ's request. The DOJ alleges that violates the National Voter Registration Act, the Help America Vote Act, and the Civil Rights Act of 1960. But Oregon Secretary of State Tobias Reed rejected the Justice Department's request last month, saying that doing so could violate Oregon's privacy laws.
The federal government is exceeding their authority in this regard. They're entitled to public records like anyone else, and if they want to fill out the form and pay the fee, we'll provide them that public record. But it does not include social security numbers, dates of birth, signatures, driver's license information.
An attorney for the DOJ said that in a statement on the lawsuit, in part, states simply cannot pick and choose which federal laws they will comply with, including our voting laws. Meanwhile, Steve Hobbs, the Secretary of State for Washington, said last week that his office had received a similar request for private voter information that he did not intend to comply. A homeless village in Longview is set to close next month after serving people for years. KGW's Blair Best explains why the Salvation Army says it's no longer qualified to run the site.
This tiny home village called Hope Village on the outskirts of Longview has been around for 3 years now. During that time, more than 100 people have transitioned into some form of housing. But a program that the city deems a success is now closing October 1st, and it all comes down to taxpayer dollars. For 3 years, this site has been paid for by Longview taxpayers, along with other grants. The city wants to change that and make it so the group running the site can fund it themselves and be reimbursed by Medicaid. To do that, the provider needs to be a behavioral health agency. The Salvation Army, which has been running the site, is not, so they terminated their contract. So far, the city hasn't been able to find anyone to take it over, so the site is closing October 1st. As of this week, about 23 people staying at the site are trying to figure out where they will go next.
It's really disappointing because it helps a lot of people get off the street.
When we saw it, we realized pretty easily that we were no longer qualified. We couldn't even apply. Being in our third year, we were well entrenched into this program. We had gained a lot of ground. We were seeing many successes.
I mean, I am a taxpayer, so taxpayer dollars down the toilet seems like a waste.
Now, we're told there's still about a dozen people inside the site that don't have a strong plan of where they'll go next. And the city of Longview recently passed a camping ban, so if they end up on the streets, they could face fines and possible jail time. In Longview, Washington, Blair Best, KGW News.
Oregon's Attorney General Dan Rayfield is warning folks about an uptick in EBT card skimming cases. Thieves hide skimming devices in payment terminals to steal card numbers and PINs. And in a statement, Rayfield said that he's seen 50% more money stolen in Oregon in the last 2 weeks than the previous 2 months combined. EBT cards are particularly vulnerable because they lack modern security features, and he recommends that cardholders should only use the official EBT website to manage their account and change their PIN regularly.